What's good in the neighborhood, everybody? We about to get it poppin'. Let's see who's in the building, though. Let's see who is in here. He got 4 people in the building. Shout out to everybody here. We finna get these OLMEC wars on and poppin'. Let's get it on and poppin'. Yeah. Give me a 1 if you can hear my voice loud and clear. You got 4 folk in the building. Yeah, we about to get this on and popping. Shout out to everybody in the building. Shout out to everybody in the build. I'm finna play. What's good, Trigger? What's good? What's good, Kevin? Appreciate you for being here. We're about to have a fun show. I'm gonna play my new song. If you haven't seen it, it's called Sertima. And for all of my Portuguese speakers out there, for all of my Brazilians out there. I know some of y'all have been, asking me to do some more Portuguese content, and I'm getting there. Hey, shout out to Healthy Green Lifestyle. This says this is your first live. Shout out to you. Shout out to you for tuning in. I appreciate that. Shout out to Yehuda Lion. Shout out to Baltimore. I love Baltimore accent. Lamar Jackson is my favorite player. I don't like the Ravens though right now because they're kind of choke artists. And honestly, I'm kind of torn in between Lamar and Shador because I've been a fan of Shador ever since he was at Jackson State. I was watching Shador and I watched him tear it up in Colorado. And this morning I was all like, man, I'm a Shador fan, but I realized that he's playing for the Browns, and the Browns are like the worst, the worst NFL franchise. So I'm like, man, I want to root for my dude Shador, but like, he's playing for the Browns. So, shout out to Yehuda Lioness. Being your first live. Shout out to you. Yeah, Lamar's injured, right? So Lamar hasn't really been playing too well. And certain Ravens fans have been, they want to bench him for Snoop Huntley. And I can't say that I'm not necessarily a Ravens fan as much as I'm a Lamar fan. And I'm also not I'm definitely not a Browns fan. I'm a Shador fan. So, I get caught in between, like, wanting their team to succeed and knowing that they're not playing for the best franchise. So that's what's up, Shout out to all the Baltimore family and all the people in the building. We are gonna and I hope I'm saying this right. Kesa Koyama. He hit raw nerves with people. Even Dwayne Omawale. Yeah, Dwayne Wong. I've spoken to him in the past before, and I have nothing personal against him. And, even the way that I react to people online, you may think that I'm taking it personally, but to me, it's really funny, because there's a lot of PAINOs who I call Pan-Africanist in name only. And with respect to the OLMEC information, they're really emotional. They're extremely emotional. And to me, I never really knew that this type of content would get the reaction that it got, but I think it's really helpful for us to be able to come together and have some common sense and have some objectivity. So before we continue, I'm gonna play my new song that I co-created with some assistance, and it's in Portuguese. It's like a karaoke funk style, and I studied Portuguese. You know, a lot of people don't know this. Healthy Green says I was born in Boston. There are many Portuguese. Pinto is a common name. Oh yeah, no, I actually my my father and one of my brothers, he's going to school in Boston. My youngest brother actually, he's studying engineering in Boston. So I'm really familiar with the New England area. A lot of Cape Verdeans. Shout out to Cabo Verde. You know, shout out to all the Cape Verdeans, Cabo Verdeanos and Cabo Verdeanas. You know, shout out to all the fam. You know, so like I'm gonna eventually get to. Excuse me. Let me get a drink of water. I'm having a cough. Yeah, so like I've been meaning to do, you know, more Portuguese content because I am fluent, or I can hold a conversation in Portuguese. I've done a lot of Portuguese research. As well as French content. You know, I'm going to eventually get to that as well. I'm not really in the space there yet, but that is coming up the pipe. And you know, with all the support that I've been receiving, you know, shout out to everybody who's been supporting. Um, you know, this has been a grind, but you know, with your help, I can get more of this content out there, especially with Ivan Van Sertima. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and play my track. I might play it a few times, you know, just for everybody in the building, and it is my hope that you enjoy. Yeah, it says I have 2 people watching, which is definitely not accurate. But let's get this on and popping.
De pedra nasceu a história que grita. OLMEC pretos, raízes que agitam, rostos talhados, lábios que contam.
I gotta go back. My bad about that. My tunes are in the background. I gotta locate them before we can continue. Shout out to y'all in the building. Appreciate y'all. Your dad went to UMass. That's what's up. For sure.
De pedra nasceu a história que grita. OLMEC pretos, raízes que agitam, rostos talhados, lábios que contam. Na terra, a força africana brota. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Do Atlântico veio o vento que guia, de terras distantes a sabedoria vivia. No barro e na pedra a alma resistia. Pretos e fortes, sua marca persistia. Escuta o tambor, o eco do passado. O Ivan nos mostrou, o legado é sagrado. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Oh, lábios grossos, narizes que falam nosso DNA, o tempo não cala. Desenhos antigos, histórias marcadas. Preto é poder, raízes guardadas. pedra nasceu, a história que grita. OLMEC pretos, raízes que agitam, rostos talhados, lábios que contam. Na terra, a força africana brota. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Do Atlântico veio o vento que guia, de terras distantes a sabedoria vivia. No barro e na pedra a alma resistia. Pretos e fortes sua marca persistia. Escuta o tambor, o eco do passado. Ivan nos mostrou, o legado é sagrado. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Oh, lábios grossos, narizes que falam nosso DNA, o tempo não cala. Desenhos antigos, histórias marcadas. Preto é poder, raízes guardadas.
Yeah, shout out to, Renoka Rashidi. That's a song, called Sertima, which will eventually be released soon. But I just wanted to give y'all a little taste of what I have to offer. And, shout out to anybody from Brazil. I'm not from Brazil. I think you can tell by my accent that I was, raised in the United States. That my family is from the continent. One of my ancestors is actually very famous historically. And I've made some videos about him in the past. But yeah, like I am of Central African descent. And if you're familiar, with African textiles, you can kind of see, in the logo and, the banner that I use, you can kind of see where I'm coming from. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. I appreciate, shout out to Patahotep, shout out to Lee Clinton, shout out to all of the supporters. And yeah, I'm the type of person to go into content that people are scared to venture into. And, tomorrow with Tro Black, we're going to be able to do a live on the recent Salem Metal study dealing with North African ancestry, right? Now, with this, we're going to get into this, and I'm going to talk about Ivan Van Sertima here. And, before I get into, the topic of Ivan Van Sertima, I just want to say that, okay, let me just backtrack. I want to give y'all a brief rundown of my journey, and I'm going to give you an honest take about, just my past with this type of content. So, I was initially, I think the first time I read Ivan Van Sertima was probably, I was like a teenager, maybe 18, 19, 20. And I didn't get all the way through the book, They Came Before Columbus, but I was able to grasp some of the basics of his argument. And his argument is not simply, culture historical archaeology, in the same vein that, certain people who I would call shills, like Bernardo Ortiz Montellano, Haslip Vieira, Barber, Glenn Daniels, right? Those four names that I mentioned, pay very close attention to them, because most of the time, especially when you go into AI and you ask AI about They Came Before Columbus, they're going to give you Montellano's article as a primary source. They're going to give you Haslip Vieira's article as a primary source. Most of the sources are going to be Anglo-centric, meaning that they're going to be in English. And, this goes to show you why you should be very careful with using AI. Me personally, I have an engineering background and I have some experience testing engineering software professionally. So my approach to AI is different from the average person in the sense that I'm usually trying to prove the machine wrong because that's just my experience. And I also know that with respect to African research, there's a lot of information that is, not going to be in English. And there's a lot of information that's not going to be in European languages. Like, believe it or not, Africa is sort of going through a scholastic renaissance. You have people like, Mubabingi Bololo, who he's producing African-centered research in Chaluba. You have individuals at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop, and they're producing content in Wolof and Bambara, right? So you have a lot of research being done today in, indigenous African languages on the continent. And AI certainly does not have the ability and the wherewithal to be able to track a lot of that research. So a lot of the things that I use to test AI is going to come from, my own research in database. And I can tell you with respect to this research, I didn't really have to use any African languages, any documentary evidence in African languages. Primarily, to be quite frank, a lot of this stuff was in English. Not even a lot of it was in French, though there are, scholars that I've used in Spanish and Portuguese. But what I really wanted to get into this episode, because if y'all remember the last episode, we did of the OLMEC Wars, and yes, this is going to be a continuous show, just because a lot of people find it interesting. A lot of people react to it. A lot of people on both sides have told me that this is something that they want to see. So, what I'm doing with these posts is I'm documenting the different scholars who have supported Ivan van Sertima, who have supported his proposals. And, just to make it clear, like when you type it into AI, they're going to tell you that he's unanimously rejected. And some of these scholars have basically spoken about how that's absolutely not the case. So this first post is going to deal with just the idea of the transatlantic crossing, being available to Africans. And that picture in the right is my attempt, the bottom right, that's my attempt to reconstruct, the Kanta ships, which were cargo ships used in the Songhai Empire. And, I had, so there are some people when I first posted it said that there's no such thing as a Kanta. And, when I started to hear that, I just thought to myself, these guys are emotional. These guys are not dealing with the facts at hand. Because if you're anybody who makes the claim that there's no such thing as a Kanta is just not familiar with the maritime, like the 15th and 16th and onward century maritime technology of the Songhai people that they borrowed from the Sorko, right? So that's what you're going to know, and you're going to see these themes. Scholars like Aaron Kamugisha, who I mentioned here, he has stated that a good majority of the critiques against Ivan van Sertima were polemical, right? And essentially, these are conservative scholars. You don't really see that many liberal or left-wing or progressive scholars go after Sertima. Most of the scholars who do go after him are right-leaning. They come from the right. So this is what Aaron Kamugisha noticed. He detailed how it was a polemical attack, a political attack, and not scholastic. So, and you can look at all of these scholars. You can examine their work. You have Aaron Kamugisha, right? You have Pathe Diang. And Pathe Diang is someone who is a huge element of the UNESCO papers. So people who try to discount his scholarship, you're not really going to get really far with that because he is well respected in the African space, well respected in the linguistic space. He has just done a phenomenal job, basically continuing the work that Van Sertima started. And, he deserves a ton of credit, a ton of credit for his legacy in helping do that. Then you have Tomowski. Tomowski, he's a Polish scholar. And Thor Heyerdahl. Thor Heyerdahl, if I'm not mistaken, is Norwegian. And these are two European scholars. These are not what you would call African-centered scholars, Tomowski and Heyerdahl. And I could say that maybe some of what they say is a little bit hinged towards Western conceptions. But these two scholars, Tomowski and Heyerdahl, speak about West Africa possessing diverse vessel traditions, right? So these include the plank-built freighters like the Kanta, right? And again, this is something that a lot of people who like what I call PAINOs, they don't believe that the black race had the ability to develop, highly advanced vessels in antiquity, right? They don't believe that we had the ability to build plank-built freighters or soon plank and last whole craft, right? They don't believe that. And I just find that quite insane if you consider the fact that, the riverine vessels, or the riverine and lake estuarine systems were a prominent part of the African economy, right? And then again, when you're talking about, because a lot of individuals said that, the river craft, the Africans had river craft, and that these craft weren't seabound. But I mean, anybody, and y'all could correct me in the chat, but anybody who knows about navigation knows that rivers are actually a lot more difficult to navigate than oceans, especially when you're dealing with changing elevations, you're dealing with different terrain, adverse terrain. There could be different rivers where the hole is a little bit too large, so you're going to have to figure out a way to navigate through, adverse geology and bathymetry, which is the underground or underwater topology. So, I mean, the idea that, these craft are solely river-bound craft and are not able to take the sea, I think is a little bit short-sighted, especially when you consider the sails. Now, this is another thing that, a lot of people, which again, these are Pan-Africanists in name only. And I find it interesting how they would want to negate the integrity of African technology just because they have a personal beef against the Aborigines. And we're going to get into that further. But, the Loco and Zapoli, these are almadillas or like large dugout craft. I think it's a little bit inaccurate to call them canoes per se, because Diagni actually gets into that. Diang, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. Diang, he gets into that, how many of these so-called, canoes had sails. So just the fact that they had sails, and even what Diag considered the predecessor of the caravel, right? That's used, like it's the large timber structure used on these ocean crafts to aid in navigation. I don't think you could limit them to canoes. But moving forward, Thor Heyerdahl actually, proved that the papyrus boat of the Baduma people in Lake Chad, similar to, ancient Kemetic boats, it made it from West Africa to Barbados. So anybody saying that African technology couldn't cross the ocean, that was disproven, because Thor Heyerdahl accomplished it. Thor Heyerdahl accomplished it in a few months. So African navigators, they had a very, very close understanding of the equatorial countercurrent, the Guinea current, and the northbound return loop of the North Atlantic gear. And you can see that on the left, right? So this would enable crossings of 2,000 to 3,000 miles across the ocean, right? So they combined practical seamanship with Afro-Islamic tools that they gained from the Islamic world, such as the astrolabe, the quadrant, the kamal, and star-based night steering, right? So star-based steering was the primary tool that was used. And in my view, especially the view of scholars like Diang, this is something that they use successfully, and they didn't even need these Islamic tools. But by the time of Abu Bakari's reign in his voyage in the 14th century, they had plenty of these tools available at their disposal. So, this would have aided them in that journey even more. Right? So you have many European eyewitnesses accounts. And again, this is another error, this is another flaw when we're doing reconstruction. The fact that we're heavily reliant on European drawings of African vessels. We're heavily reliant on European documents of these vessels. That's something that is a flaw, because many of them may have even tried to short size. If they saw a vessel that was 30 meters or about 100 feet, they may try to say that, it was 50 feet. So like what they saw, you may even want to add, some length and breadth, to the beam, right? But again, just these scholars, Aaron Kamagisha, Diang, Timowski, and Heyerdahl, Africans possess the ability to travel abroad. And Ptahhotep says less than a month. I don't know about less than a month. But I do know that the ships, according to these scholars, were able to travel really fast, 100 leagues, which is about 300 or so miles. So they were able to travel extremely fast. They were good ships. They were really, really strong ships. All right, so let's go ahead and go to the next. I forgot my music. My bad, y'all. I want y'all to be able to enjoy. I don't want it to be too loud. But shout out to everybody in the building. I'm a 90s kid, so I'm a fan of the funk music. Shout out to DJ Quick. Shout out to Dr. Dre. Shout out to the West Coast. Shout out to all the greats. So let's get back into this. I'm missing my where's my I don't know. Yeah. All right. So I want y'all to remember this, right? So again, you go into Chat GPT and you ask about Ivan Van Sertima. They're not going to mention OLMEC archaeologists like Dr. Clarence Weant. He wrote a letter to the New York Times, May 1st, 1977, in response to a lot of the criticism that Ivan Van Sertima was receiving. And what did he say? He said, this is what he said about, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. This is an OLMEC archaeologist. This is somebody who excavated the heads. I want y'all to take heed to this. This is not some dude off the side of the road. This is a legitimate scholar who worked in excavation for the OLMECs. He writes, this is what he sent to the New York Times. Ivan Van Sertima's work is a summary of 6 or 7 years of meticulous research based upon archaeology, Egyptology, African history, oceanography, astronomy, botany, rare Arabic and Chinese manuscripts, the letters and journals of early American explorers, and observations of physical anthropologists. As one who has been immersed in Mexican archaeology for some 40 years and who participated in the excavation of the first giant heads, I must confess, I am thoroughly convinced of the soundness of Van Sertima's conclusions. I mean, that's a mic drop. This is a foremost expert in OLMEC archaeology, saying that he's thoroughly convinced of the soundness of Van Sertima's conclusions. Not even just the validity, for those of y'all who are familiar with logic. The soundness, meaning the truth value of Van Sertima's conclusions. So y'all got to let me know in the chat. What do y'all think of this OLMEC archaeologist? I got to sit on this. this OLMEC archaeologist who stated that he is thoroughly convinced of the soundness of his conclusions. Shout out to Hidden Scholar 12. You know what's good. Shout out to you for being here. Appreciate you very, very much. That's a mic drop, right? That's a mic drop for sure. Like a OLMEC archaeologist with 40 years of experience in Mexican archaeology. This right here, anytime, and I'm going to write an article. You know, just breaking some of this data down, you know, with all the references. I might put it up on Substack. My Substack has been weak. I have a lot of drafts that I haven't finished. So, and I know a lot of y'all have been asking me for it. Hey, shout out to Hidden Scholar. I didn't know that you were from South Africa. No, shout out to South Africa. Is that Ferno? Is this Ferno from, you know, we've DM'd each other. This may not be Ferno from South Africa. He's a rapper from South Africa who, you know, we've shared resources in the past. But yeah, I got a lot of you know, supporters from South Africa. And he actually is doing a honeymoon over there right now. Shit. You know, so yeah, shout out to South Africa. What do y'all think about that? I need some more feedback. What do y'all think about clearing? Like, do I even have to continue, or is this a mic drop? Hi, shout out to you, Hidden Scholar. All good, all good. Yeah, no, I got a lot of fans in South Africa, in Tanzania. I'm definitely gonna go there soon. You know, I haven't really been to South Africa ever, but I want to go there. I heard it's a really beautiful country. But yeah, this is a mic drop of all mic drops. Oh, you're from the States. Oh, that's what's up. That's what's up. You're from the States. You know, yeah, what made you want to move to South Africa? What made you want to move there? You just wanted a new environment. You wanted the big, lovely sisters, if you know what I mean. The voluptuous women from Southern Africa. Waist to hip ratios. Shout out to the South African sisters who may be listening to this. That's supposed to be a compliment. Yeah, but yeah, it's a mic drop for sure. All right, and no more feedback. But again, like, this is, I have to say this because a lot of people claim that, oh, he said Gotti says I'm from the big UK. Yeah, shout out to UK. You know, look, the Comgyverse is international. We got supporters from all over the place. You know, I mean, my stats say that it's majority US, but I think that we have support from all over the place. Just look, judging from the chat alone. And I'm really happy about that. You know, I'm really happy to be able to have built, you know, just this support. And I appreciate everybody in the building, especially the members who are here and able to contribute. But again, like, Van Sertima was not a culture historical archaeologist or diffusionist. He largely is in the same tradition as Diop. And again, they came before Columbus was written in the 70s. If you consider the fact that it was written in the 70s, that was a gold standard in terms of a pluridisciplinary approach, right? And there's the fact that, you know, Van Sertima is referenced in the UNESCO papers. I wanted to bring that up. I wasn't able to really find it, or I wasn't able to load the papers. But you know, like, he's referencing the UNESCO papers. So if he was such a pseudo as a lot of these PAINOs, Pan-Africanist in name only state, you know, then he would not have been referenced in the UNESCO papers. So, you know, this OLMEC archaeologist stated, you know, Van Sertima's experience, archaeology, Egyptology, African history, oceanography, astronomy, botany. He's using Arabic and Chinese manuscripts, letters and journals. So he had a pluridisciplinary approach, right? So, yeah, shout out to Ptolemy, you know, definitely. So let's move on. This is something that, you know, you guys have to be willing to take heed to. And Aaron Kamugisha, he speaks about how the Spaniards destroyed documents. So there's a lot of evidence linking Africa and the Americas that was literally destroyed. It was destroyed by the Spaniards. Bishop de Landa of Yucatan, he ordered the wholesale destruction of Native American books with the words, "Burn them all, they are the works of the devil." So again, the destruction of artifacts took place on both sides during the Ma'afa. We have to take heed of that. So that's why, having a approach that says if there's no material remains, then we can't say that there was any contact is a little bit invalid, because many of the remains brought over, and we're going to get into the flora and fauna, maybe not in this episode, but we're going to do a separate episode just dealing with the flora and fauna. So the destruction of artifacts makes it difficult to reconstruct. They destroyed artifacts and documentary records. There is evidence, like there's again documentation, public statements by the Bishop de Landa of Yucatan about how they destroyed the evidence. So we can't go off of the material evidence alone. To me, linguistics is probably the strongest suit. I'm not a fan of genetics, but y'all were able to y'all saw the validation. The fact that Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA database, you got Belize with haplogroup BT. I mean, that in and of itself is a mic drop. You have the Ancient DNA Explorer showing haplogroup BT in Chichen Itza in the 9th century, right? Like, so there is evidences even genetically of like African ancestry in Mesoamerica, right? And look, I'm the first person to bring this out. I don't see nobody else talk about BT in Mexico, right? Nobody else spoke about that. So again, there's a destruction of the documents that took place. So we have to, take that into consideration. Now, this is going to deal with just some of the different individuals. And you say they destroyed them because they didn't want our recently kidnapped and enslaved African brothers and sisters to make the connection that their ancestors already were here. Look, I think some of them knew. I think some of them, especially the Mandes, Dr. Patha Diang and G. Diawara actually spoke about, how it was, indebted within the oral history. Mumuni Kuyate actually has documents. Patha Diaghi speaks about this. He has documents detailing trade, on both sides of the ocean, even after the 14th century, early 14th century voyage. So many of them knew. Many of them, especially those who were linked with the Mandinka and some of the, Mande people, they knew, right? But again, they did destroy the documents just to establish more control. So, Aaron Kamugisha, who is a professor, he wrote this in the Journal of Caribbean History. So again, if you want a scholar who is, defended Van Sertima, look no further than Aaron Kamugisha. He just had an incredible article that I thought, that more brothers and sisters need to see this, right? And even before I continue, I need to go back. I was giving y'all like a breakdown. I was giving y'all a breakdown of my journey, right? So again, I was a young kid and I was reading Van Sertima. I didn't finish all of his text, but I read enough of it to get the grasp of his argument. And I think Dr. Runoko Rashidi, he was another, very, very legendary scholar that I was able to read some of his work, read some of his research, especially African presence in early America, which a lot of people don't realize that African presence in early America was an update to They Came Before Columbus. So a lot of people who deal with Ivan Van Sertima, they deal with the 76, They Came Before Columbus, and they don't deal with the later, 1990s, late 80s, 90s publication of African presence in early America. So I got to a point where, and this was gonna be like the 2020s, the late aughts and the 2020s, where I said to myself, you started to have the Aborigines grow, the people who were saying like the we was already here type of stuff. And there's many different ways to take that. Like, so for me, when I look at the Abos and the Pretendians, to me, like, those are the ones who state that black people are indigenous to the Americas, right? And it gets into there's different streams of thought, right? And for the record, I don't agree with any of these people. I never really have agreed with them. I've actually had some personal friends who are Aborigines, that's just their ideology, or maybe not Aborigines, but like they accept Aborigine consciousness. Because within African American culture, there are a lot of people who descend from Oklahoma, and they descend from they descend from the different Native American groups. So, they have ancestors who are documented as being indigenous Americans. So for them, like, the Aboriginal consciousness of, making many of those indigenous people black kind of helped them, with respect to identifying with Native Americans as their people, right? So you have those who argue, like, kind of like more of the Clyde Winters type, who argue that Africans were first to come to America, and then they were able to build long-lasting societies that basically precipitated into modern times. So I'm going to write a poll, and this is going to be a generic poll. I'm going to say, did Africans contact the OLMECs? Right, and I want y'all to give me some support as well. Okay. All right, so yeah, Are you familiar? Neferkari. He's one of my favorites. He's a really good content creator. He's a really good communicator. If you guys are not sub to him, I highly recommend it because he's a really great creator. He's really good. So yeah, I'm definitely familiar with him. So as we move on, the Abos. You got Clyde Winters. You got Ali Muhammad. There's Dane Calloway, and they're people who deal with from Clyde Winters, the Africans came to America and they built long-lasting societies, to evolution is fake and Africans were always, or black people were always in the Americas, and it can get into a very, very wide type of space. And what I would say is that while many abos reference Ivan Van Sertima, they never really read his book, because Ivan stated repeatedly, in the text, and I'm going to get into that when I get a chance. I'm going to do a deep dive in both They Came Before Columbus and African Presence in Early America. I'm going to do a deep dive into both of those texts. But Ivan Van Sertima stated that black people are not indigenous to the Americas. And he also stated that that the Africans contacted the OLMECs. So he stated that the OLMEC population at large was an indigenous American population, and that some people among the elites or some merchants contacted the OLMECs, right? So he dealt with contact as opposed to saying that all of the OLMECs were Africans, right? So these are figurines called the SE figurines that look, in their style, looks different. So very similar to that of the Mayans. No, I definitely will want to look into that. Yeah, many people have stated that the Nok terracottas look very similar to Wuthenau's collection. And honestly, I kind of want to, with Wuthenau, because he has been accused of faking artifacts and whatnot, and I want to kind of do a little bit more research into this, right? So from the ABOs, with the ABOs, when they grew in popularity, I got to the point where I never really threw away Ivan van Sertima, but I was more skeptical of his propositions, right? And what you'll find is that most of the people who have an opinion of Sertima have never really read his work front to back, and they mischaracterize what he's stating. So any connection of Van Sertima to the ABOs is just completely, I mean, it's just disingenuous. It's scammy, because he went into great detail to basically reiterate that black people are not indigenous to the Americas. He went through great detail. Now, he did document, and, Aaron Kamugisha actually speaks about these different European explorers who discovered people who they defined as black in the Americas. Now, some of them may have been Melanesian from the Pacific Islands. And again, it's funny. Most Western scholars today, the Americana scholars, they'll accept the idea that Asians crossed the Pacific to make it to the Americas. They'll accept the Pacific Ocean travel to the Americas, but they won't accept the Atlantic, when the Atlantic is a lot closer. It's a lot smaller of an ocean to cross than the Pacific, right? So many of these people that they saw, that these Europeans saw, could have been Melanesians. Many of these OLMECs, some of these OLMECs, because we found the P1 Y-DNA haplotype, the ancient DNA explorer. These OLMECs could have been Melanesian. That is a possibility. The heads that we are displaying, they could have been Melanesian. I'm not saying that that's not possible. That is definitively a possibility, right? And then other of these people could have just been dark-skinned, indigenous Americans that were not Melanesian. Clovis, Beringian descendants that were not Melanesian. That's also a possibility. That's also a possibility. However, they did see people who they defined as black. Vasco Nunes de Balboa, Lopez de Gomarar, Labi Brasur, de Bubu, Fray Gregoria Garcia. They saw black people in the Americas. And then you have Alfonso de Quattrofage, and he noted distinct ethnic groups among Native Americans in Florida, the Jamasi, Brazil, Charuas, and St. Vincent, right? So these would be groups that he believed came from Africa. Ivan van Sertima, so to speak. And then he also had a map by a sea captain, Kerhale, which showed black settlements along the South American coast, right? So it's something that we need to take a look at. We could take a look at that as well. So let me make this a little bit bigger. I don't know. Uh-oh. That's how big it can go. So far, let me check the poll. We got 7 votes. 7 votes so far, 100%. Right? So let's continue onward. Again, this is a Thor Heyerdahl. We spoke about how he sailed from West Africa to Barbados using a traditional boat. This is all traditional. So ancient African vessels were obviously able to cross the Atlantic, and this offers technological support for Ivan van Sertima's migration model, right? Technological support for that. So you say, what think of our ancestors swam to places like Hawaii, Fiji, and Samoa? Well, yeah, I mean, there are many Fijians who detail that their ancestors came from Tanzania like 4,000 years ago, and they migrated in the Pacific Ocean. And, you know, there's some people who have even done some linguistic connections. I'm not as familiar with the linguistic aspect of the Melanesian to African connection. I do know that, you know, there are scholars who have tried to connect them to the Dravidians and stuff like that. So I'm not as familiar with it. And let me just be frank, you know, going back to the ABO thing, right? I never really let down Ivan van Sertima when the ABOs came to be. I just became a little bit more skeptical, and it was actually Netter Neb from Baltimore, right? Netter Neb, I give him a lot of credit because he showed me things that I didn't know before. So if you're on YouTube, you know, subscribe to Kadika. I think that's his channel. And also support, you know, Abibi Tumikasa. Support, you know, Dr. Obadale Cambone. Because Netter Neb was the one who pointed me towards the aerial diffusion and the contact between, you know, some of the Mixokian languages and the African languages, which in my opinion would be the strongest evidence of contact. So, you know, he deserves a lot of credit. And this is something that isn't recent. This is something that I believe that they were trading extensively for a very long time. You know, and the flora and fauna evidence shows this. So, yeah, many argue there have never been European accounts. That's not true. You know, Trigger, that's not true. Now, you can say that maybe the people that they saw were darker natives. You know, maybe some of them were Melanesian. Maybe some of them were not what we consider Africans today. But many Europeans who came to America saw dark people. They saw some really dark people, so. Yeah, the helmets. Yeah, I'm gonna need to. I mean, yeah, that's a really good argument. The helmets. I'm gonna need to look more deeper into that. Because as I said, you know, after Netter Neb from Kadika peer review channel, after he showed me the linguistics, I was like, okay, there's something there. There's something there with the connection. And it enabled me to like get from the skeptical position to say that, okay, Ivan van Sertima was correct because he just stated contact. Again, he never said that all of the OLMECs were black. He just said that Africans had contact with the OLMECs, right? So from there, I was in the position of, okay, Ivan van Sertima was right about that part. Now, more recently, I just had a lot of people, like there was this one troll who I'm not even going to mention, but he was trolling my chat. He was attacking Troll Black. He was just being really disrespectful. And Trigger is familiar with who I'm referring to. He was just being really disrespectful. And I told him to stop, and I said, hey, if you want to be skeptical against Sertima, it's okay, but at least be respectful. And he wasn't being respectful. He was promoting a lot of white supremacist tropes. So I said, you know what? I sat down and said, I'm going to take some time to read Sertima. You know, I'm going to take some time to like look into scholars who have supported him, you know, white scholars, black scholars, and I just want to get to the bottom of this. And from my research, I just found that a lot of the scholars who opposed Sertima were racist. A lot of it is polemical. It wasn't based upon legitimate scholarship. They were biased. They would mischaracterize his statements, and just promote racism and white supremacy. So from there, I kind of got onto this current pathway, and just be, just to try to give more of a steel man to Sertima's proposals. That's been my main objective. I mean, it's like, hello, the constant spam of native side-by-side comparison. And you know what's funny about that trigger? Is that the natives that they're showing, most geneticists will admit that they have African ancestry. Now, they'll say that the African ancestry came from the 15th century, post-Columbus, but they had African ancestry. So, if you're taking a cladistical approach, many of those features could be African features that had positive selection, right? So, like, they're actually proving our point, in a sense, if they're saying that those features, are coinciding with the OLMECs while showing that these people have recent African mixture, right? That would basically mean that the OLMEC features will be black. So, and I compared, Afro-Mexicans to the OLMECs, to be fair. And some people had a problem with that because Afro-Mexicans were mixed, quote unquote. They have a lot of Native American ancestry. So some people had a problem with that. But, it's all good. I just basically wanted to be fair to, the black people in Mexico. Yeah, Trill Black. I need to watch Trill Black. Me, Trill, and King, we're going to do an OLMEC live. Just breaking down some of this data more deeply. Me and Trill have a live tomorrow dealing with Carthage and the North Africans. So that's going to be very, very fun. But yeah, let's continue onward. So we're dealing with a Piri Reis map. The Piri Reis map is actually a map from Kemet. It was made using older maps in Kemet, right? And this ancient Kemetic map, shout out to Ptahhotep in the chat, they showed Cape Verde, Cabo Verde, Madeira, Azores Islands, the Canary Islands, and the Andes Mountains, according to Dr. Aaron Kamugisha. So, the ancient Kemites knew about the Americas. They had sailed to the Americas. Dr. Karan P. Kaur in the Saharan Journal spoke about the integrity of the circumnavigation of the continent by 26th Dynasty Nasut Nekau. So, in the 26th Dynasty, they had the ability to circumnavigate the continent, right? And the Kemites who made this map, they had an understanding of longitude. Whereas European encyclopedias 150 years after Columbus, which would have been 1642, in the 1640s, they declared that it was impossible to discover longitude, what the ancient Kemites had discovered in antiquity, especially noted in the Piri Reis map. So again, and on the right, you see a boat, which is one of the boats that they use to make expeditions to punt, right? So, like, obviously they had the ability to sail to the Americas, and they did, because they wouldn't have been able to make these maps if they didn't. So, it's really, really crystal clear. And again, Aaron Kamugisha, definitely support that scholar. He's done a lot of great work on this topic. Now, Kamugisha, he came after Hazlitt Vieira. because many of these hypocrites, y'all gotta listen to me when I say this. These hypocrites, they will say Polish scholar Wyszynski is wrong for his, breakdown of the Tatalikos skulls as being, a small percentage of them being African, saying that he's relying on the true Negro hypothesis. But if you look at Haslip Vieira, who criticizes Van Sertima, he uses the same true Negro hypothesis, what's called taximetrics, the statistical coordination of human traits. So these guys use the same thing to critique Van Sertima, saying that the Nile Valley Africans did not have the ability, or the Nile Valley Africans did not have the features, right? The more prognathic features that you see in Western Africa, Infra-Saharan Africa, tropical Africa, right? So, like, they'll claim that Wyszynski, the Polish scholar, is wrong for using taximetrics, while using taximetrics in Seligman's true Negro hypothesis to discount Ivan Van Sertima and his Happy River Valley origin point for the Africans among the Olmecs, his Nubio-Kemetic origin point. Haslip Vieira says these aren't true Negroes. They have more aquiline features, which we know isn't true. There are plenty like Mentuhotep and Amenhotep. There are plenty of depictions in ancient Kemet that show you more, prognathic features. But Haslip Vieira uses this to discount Sertima. And y'all are very familiar with this space. Bantoid, Niloid, Niger Congo, Khoisan, Hamite, the Somali, the Habesha, the Horners, and they use skull shapes, taximetric, Sudanid, Bantuid, Congoid. They use the same taximetrics today, some of these anthropologists, to break down and to divvy up Africa. They use the same methodology today. I don't know if y'all hear me. They use the same Django Unchained skull shape thesis, right? So it's just like, it's so hypocritical. It's so hypocritical, right? And again, Haslip Vieira, they misrepresent Sertima's botanical arguments, claiming that he brought domestication to Sertima claim that Africans brought domestication to the America. That's not true. That's not true. That's not what he said, right? That's not at all what he stated, at all, right? And they overlooked 13th century African remains in the U.S. Virgin Islands. This is something that other scholars have corroborated. You know what I'm saying? There's Africans found in the Virgin Islands in the 1250, right? That's pre-Columbus. Africans were traveling across the Atlantic before Columbus. This is a fact. This is a historical fact, right? We did come before Columbus. We weren't always here, but we were already here. That's what I'll have to say. We weren't always here, but we were already here before Columbus. And in the bottom right, you can see Haslip Vieira. He's like an Afro-Puerto Rican, but this dude is a shill. He has deep misrepresentations of Ivan Van Sertima. Really, really pathetic if you ask me. But again, hypocritical. You want to say the true Negro hypothesis and taximetrics is bad with Wyszynski, but then you use it to try to discount Van Sertima, and then moreover, it's still being used today to divide Africa, right? So this just proves the fraud. Shout out to Renoka Rashidi. OLMEC head gifted to the people of Mexico. Shout out to him. So again, African presence in early America. This is the 87 work. This is an update to the 76 work that came before Columbus. And by the way, if Van Sertima was not a legitimate scholar, he wouldn't have been invited to address the U.S. Congress during the debates over the quinticentennial or the 500-year Columbus commemoration, which would be 1992. So he was recognized by the U.S. government as a legitimate scholar on this topic. So anybody trying to say that he was pseudoscientific, why would he speak before the U.S. Congress? Why would they invite him to speak before the Smithsonian? Why is he in the UNESCO papers? Why is he in the African Union fact book? Why? If he's not a legitimate scholar, he obviously is. And there's a lot of emotion on this topic. But look, Sertima is a legend, right? He needs his respect. He deserves his respect. You may not agree with everything that he wrote down, but to act as if he was not a scholar, a scientist on this matter, it's just a lie. It's just a lie. And if you enjoy, hit me up on the Cash App if you like, this data. We're going to keep it on and popping. Been having a lot of fun with this Sertima stuff. I mean, this has been really enjoyable for me, just to see a different side of scholarship, even scholarship that I would say that I was skeptical of, right? And again, the defense of Sertima is not Aborigine, ABO, Pretendian. Sertima actually was against those people. So, he can't try to act as if he was in favor of them when he wasn't. He absolutely was not. And we got 100 votes. No detractors yet on the poll. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to everybody in the building. Oh goodness, this is another scholar. Like this, honestly, this kind of pissed me off. And I'm gonna show y'all the flaw of AI. When you ask AI about Ivan Van Sertima, they will reference the Robbing Native American Cultures article made by Montiano, Hazle Vieira, and Warren Barber. In that article, they mentioned Dr. David H. Kelly, University of Calgary professor, who defended Ivan Van Sertima. In that same article, they mentioned this scholar. So AI will say, oh, Van Sertima was universally rejected. And they'll reference an article that mentions a scholar who defended him. I mean, like, it's just... And when I look at this stuff, I'm like, wow. Like, this is going to take... I'm one person, I'm one person. I can only do so much. Shout out to everybody who has supported. But I'm one person. And when I found this, I was like, damn, bro, this is crazy. This is crazy. This is just like, I was dumbfounded, But again, Dr. David, he's an American archaeologist, legendary American archaeologist and epigrapher. And he found merit in several of Dr. Van Sertima's proposals. This is an epigrapher. He specializes in inscriptions. And he said, yes, the Tifinagh script from Africa is found in the Americas. And what David Kelly also said was that from a physical anthropological perspective, the cornrows and the philtra or philtrum is singular, and that's the lip seam, the lip curve on the OLMEC. So he said the philtra on the OLMEC monument is evidence of African affinity. Because from his research, he only saw this type of sculpting in African cultures. He didn't even see it among the Melanesians or any other population having such defined philtra in their monuments. He labeled this as an African affinity. And he also noted the fact that certain pathogens were carried from Africa to the Americas before Columbus. Your hookworm, your yaws, your ascaria, certain schistosomes, tuberculosis. And again, I did this. I'm guilty of this, saying that Van Sertima made a mistake for sourcing Barry Fell, who is an expert in sea urchins. And Martin Banal kind of corrected this with respect to the idea that, a lot of times outsiders are the ones who make changes within scholastic fields. And I'm going to break down that a little bit more further. But again, like now, today, scholars scholars know that seals, they brought tuberculosis to the Americas. They brought that disease. Seals brought that human tuberculosis to the Americas. So again, I criticized Van Sertima in the past for using berry felt. I did. However, I have to make a correction because the fact that scholars today note that seals brought tuberculosis is just like, it's just like you have to give Ivan Van Sertima credit for being pluridisciplinary in his research. Seals brought tuberculosis to the Americas, so he was right there. So yeah, so somebody voted no, and again, OLMEC weren't African, according to. Yeah, I mean, I think Grim Lowe's came late. In Ptahhotep, I know you believe that. You may be one who believes that they were all African. But Van Sertima stated that they had contact. Yeah, no, Trigger, that is because you don't really see that defined characteristic after the OLMECs. You don't see a continuation of this style. You just don't. And the way that it's carved is very African. Very, very African. So there were OLMEC who were African. Right? We can definitively conclude this. Just from this research, So David Kelly is one of the ones who supported American archaeologists, and he supported Ivan Van Sertima's proposals. So the idea that he was universally ignored or rejected is not true. Even in the Robbing Native American Cultures article by Montiano, Vieira, and Barber, they mention Kelly. They mention Kelly in that article. That Kelly supported is a tantamount to a full support or endorsement. They said Kelly's article for Sertima is tantamount to a complete endorsement. So he is an archaeologist who supported Van Sertima. So to act as if he wasn't supported on this OLMEC stuff is just a lie. It is a pure lie. Yeah, I mean, we can make that conclusion. That's fair. Right? So again, this is another instance of showing that, Sertima was not like the ABOs. He was not. He stated that this was about interconnectedness. Right? This is about interconnectedness. Right? And this is about mutual influence. So Van Sertima did not mean to castigate Native Americans. And he even said this in his speech to the Smithsonian. He did not mean to castigate the natives. He meant to show interconnectedness and mutual influence for the natives. That was his objective. That's always been his objective. 100%. So Bruce Trigger, he's a scholar that, again, came against Van Sertima. But, if you look at Van Sertima's own words, they kind of refute Bruce Trigger's critiques. Right? I have to bow out now as I'm way in Sydney and have to go. Great work. Shout out to you, Grim Lokes. No, definitely. Shout out to you. I mean, look, I got people all over the place. She's Sydney, Australia. That's probably, I don't know if it's like nighttime there or maybe like almost midnight on December 1st. But yeah, shout out to you, Grim Lokes. Appreciate you for tuning in. Now, Glenn Daniels is another critique of Sertima. And, Kamugisha gave an analysis of Glenn Daniels. And he stated that Glenn Daniels resorted to an insulting polemic against Ivan Van Sertima, right? While deliberately avoiding direct engagement with any of the evidence. And this is a lot of the PAINO criticizers, who came against this scholarship. A lot of the PAINO criticizers who came against this scholarship. They're very emotional. They're very, very emotional, and they have no direct engagement with the actual material, right? So again, Kamugisha speaks about how a lot of the criticisms directed at Van Sertima originated from conservative academic circles. For example, Stephen Howe, suspected white supremacist, if I were to use my Neely Fuller speak, he dismissed the work entirely as African American aggrandizement fantasy. So this is just ideological bias. You got PAINOs who oppose it because they're against the ABOs. You got conservatives who oppose it because they're in favor of Western hegemony. And I've always thought that Sertima deserved like a robust defense. He did. He deserves a robust defense. He deserves it in light of just the data that we have. And again, like, the endorsement of Sertima is actually an endorsement against the ABOs, because like I've been saying this whole live, Ivan Van Sertima stated that black people are not indigenous to the Americas. He didn't agree with Clyde Winters. I think Clyde Winters tried to call him a contributionist or something like that. Right? So he didn't agree. He didn't agree with some of the ABOs today. Right? So again, me defending Van Sertima is an opposition to the ABOs. Direct opposition. Yeah, no, Stephen Howe, even what's that? The Isaac Samuel African History Extra. When he made an article against Diop and he referenced Stephen Howe and he referenced Clarence Walker like 10 times in the article. And I was just like, how in the hell, like, you see a lot of people who get into this space are following after Africanist. And that's why I wanted to read Roger Blench's article here, because he breaks down how like Afro-Asiatic, Niger-Congo, or like hypothetical phyla. He breaks that down. He did really good work in the new UNESCO papers. So a lot of these dudes follow these working hypotheses that have never been proven, right? And they get into the Africanist space. And the only legitimate scholarship on Africa is what white scholars and some of their lackeys, right? Some of their Negro lackeys write about Africa. But, that's fraudulent, right? So, like, these guys are not connected to the Dr. Benz, the John Henry Clarks of the world, the Asantes. They're not connected to these guys. So, they're not centered. They're not rooted. They're just out in space. They're like where our universe is legit, but they're in some type of like white supremacist universe or whatever. So, they just don't got it. If you reference Stephen Howe uncritically, I mean, you're a op. You're a kunologist to me. If you reference Lefkowitz and Howe and Clarence Walker and all these dudes and Kwame Appiah, you know what I'm saying? If you reference these dudes, it's just like, bruh. Like, to me, I don't take you seriously. Shout out to y'all listening. I ain't got a chat yet. Not yet. Let me see.
I'm gonna start another goal here. I'm gonna make this goal like an I made a goal again. So right now we got 14 votes, 7%. Shout out to y'all. James Blount. You know, James Blount, he respected Ivan Van Sertima. He respected the contact model for opposing European racial hegemony. While Blount took a strong stance against diffusionism, he agreed with Sertima's position on Africans settling in the Americas before Columbus. I mean, that's a mic drop. Because this is another prominent archaeologist who agreed with Ivan Van Sertima. He agreed with Ivan Van Sertima that Africans settled in the Americas before Columbus. This is an African-centered scholar. This is a European Western scholar. He's one of the founders of uniformitarianism as opposed to diffusionism. So this is a European scholar who agreed with Van Sertima that Africans settled in the Americas before Columbus. The thing about Blount is he did not think that the Africans who came to America before Columbus had a major impact on the culture. But again, there are prominent scholars who supported Ivan Van Sertima. There are white scholars who supported Ivan Van Sertima's thesis. You know, Clarence Wynant, James Blount, David Kelly. These are white guys. Tomowski, right? Heyerdahl. These are white guys. Hey, shout out to Without History. Africans more than contracted the OLMECs. The writing was derived from Nubio-Kemetic writing. Their base 10 numerology was African, along with many other motifs. No, hey, shout out to Without History. You know, Without History is a real one. Y'all gotta subscribe to his channel. And we've been working. We may have to do a collab video because I mean we're doing me and King monologue and Trill Black. We're about to do a little OLMEC presentation, but we may have to do a collab video because I mean I'm not fully as convinced on the writing, even though some brothers and sisters have came to me and brought me some research. I'm gonna need to look into the writing aspect of it a little bit further. So like we're gonna have to share some data. And Without knows me, like I've been skeptical, like I remember me and Without, we were chatting like 2 years ago. We were talking about the OLMECs, and we were talking about Clyde Winters, and I explained to him, I was like, you know what, I'm not fully on board with Clyde. Even today, I'm not fully on board with Clyde's methodology. I think that there's some errors there, you know. So we've gone back and forth, but me doing this research recently, I just to see just the amount of support that Ivan Van Sertima has gotten, not only in African-centered spaces, but in European, among Western scholars, right? So again, we gotta put respect on Ivan Van Sertima's name. So like, you know, Without, you know, we definitely got to do a collab video, you know, with both of our channels again, just talking about Ivan Van Sertima, talking about African maritime technology, West African sailboats. Yes, West Africans built sailboats before Columbus. Ancient Kemites obviously built sailboats. West Africans had sailboat navigation technology before Columbus. That's crystal clear, right? So, you know, we're going to get to it, and it'll be pretty easy. I already got the script lined up. So you can work your magic and your editing. Without is like one of the best editors on YouTube. Like, he's really good. He's really, really good. So shout out to him and his channel. About to get this on and popping. Actually, that's my last, in this rendition of the archaeological evidence, that's my last piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go forward and just get back into some of the genetic evidence. And I hope to, you know, I hope to publish something in the future just to have a modern support of Van Sertima. Now, I'll say this, and some of you will not like this, but I have to be 100% honest with y'all here. So, there are modern black scholars. One sister who her dissertation was about defending Ivan Van Sertima's work. And there are two other brothers who I saw, they did dissertations, recent dissertations. Shout out to Sali, right? Speaking truth to power. No shout out to you for tuning in. But these are African American scholars who did dissertations in support of Ivan Van Sertima. And I may share them on my members only live. The reason why I'm not sharing them is, to me, in my personal opinion, their arguments weren't as strong as some of the arguments that I'm showing you. However, there are scholars, Black American scholars and African scholars, who are publishing work in favor of Ivan Van Sertima. So for the members, you're going to be able to see my breakdown of some of these scholars. But ultimately, like I said, I just didn't really feel comfortable with the integrity of their scholarship. And there are some holes in some of their arguments. So I haven't really shared them to the public because I don't really want them to be heavily scrutinized. I don't think they deserve it. But, the work, a luta continua, the work definitively continues. So let's continue onward. Y'all should be able to see this. My genetics. So we're heading to the end. And I want to show you some of these because I'm going to make some posts with regards to the pathological evidence of the contact. So we already know with Jean-Philippe Gourdin, who again is in the UNESCO papers. Shout out to Dr. Gourdin. Hold on a second. What is that? What's going on here? I have two of these. This is weird. Let me close the other one. I might want to close this one. I don't know why that's showing up. Yeah, I have. That's kind of weird. I don't know why that's showing up right now. Okay, I'm gonna have to close this window right here. I don't need this right now. All right, for sure. Shout out to everybody in the building. So yeah, the Trois. I could buy that honestly. Now, one of the things that I didn't find, I remember reading this from David Imhotep, and they spoke about the YALU polymorphism in the Fuegians in Patagonia in South America. And I didn't really find that in my recent research. So, yeah, I wasn't able to corroborate that with modern contemporary. My percentage is going down. What's going on here? You got 16 votes. I may end the poll, to be honest. I may end the poll. You got my percentage going down. Y'all are crazy. Get me up to 90 and I'm going to end the poll. I ain't trying to have it. If it goes down more, I'm going to end it. You probably got some hate watchers. It's all good. So again, Gourdin, who's in the UNESCO papers, he was able to connect, Kemet to West Africa using tuberculosis. And again, seals brought tuberculosis to the Americas. That's what most scholars accept. So, yeah. We're almost done here. I'm going to get into just some of the... Hold on a sec, y'all. My bad, y'all. Let me get back to my page. So let me get into some of this analysis here. So you have leprosy, obviously, connecting them, sickle cell anemia, you know. So now, this is the DNA validation for all of y'all DNA heads. This is going to be the DNA validation of the argument. Right, I'm going to move this over here. Got some of these Melanesians. I got some of that. There's some of my. Oh, actually, I got a lot of stuff that I didn't even show. All right, let's get into it. Just even before we get into the DNA validation, I want to get into Obadele Cambone, who is a scholar of scholars, and he affirmed that the pushback against Ivan Van Sertima Mesoamerican migration model is ideological, not scholarly. This is Obadele Cambone. Western critics say Africans couldn't cross the Atlantic before Columbus, yet these same scholars accept that Europeans, Asians, Pacific Islanders, monkeys, and rats all reached the Americas before Columbus. In other words, everybody except Africans is capable of making such a journey. And this is important for y'all to be able to see, because a lot of these fraudulent, Western scholars have stated that even monkeys and rats could make it to the Americas, but Africans could not. So, shout out to Obadele Cambone. Shout out to, Abibi Tumikasa. Shout out to all of the, good brothers and sisters over there. Yeah, Vikings, there is some evidence, of that. The Vikings, from the Phoenicians, the Viking ships were basically renditions of the Phoenician ships. I'm going to get more into that as well. But this has kind of been fun, just getting into like the African maritime technologies. That's been really fun. That's been really enjoyable. But again, Cambone, this from the Cambone, if anything, I want y'all to remember this. That head in the middle is called Negro. That's called Negro. Yeah, I'm gonna give me some more votes. Yeah, no, me and Gotti, me and King, we speak frequently. King is really good. But I need one more vote. I need my poll to get to 90. If y'all don't get me to 90 in like the next 5, I'm gonna just end it. I gotta be at 90. Come on, guys. Come on, y'all. I gotta be at 90. Get me to 90. It's all good though. It's all good. Vote honestly. If you obviously don't agree, don't be coerced. Don't be coerced to vote in favor of what I want you to. Kamugisha, look at him. He spoke about the skeletal remains in the Tiffanaga inscription on St. John's Island. We broke that down. We broke that down as well. Shout out to y'all. Yeah, the God Bess. There's obviously some parallels. There's obviously some parallels. For sure. For showsies. For showsies. For showsies. For showsies. Alright. Let's continue on. Appreciate everybody for going in. I mean, I like it when I can do these impromptu lives and y'all can come on in. I really like that. It makes this a lot more enjoyable. Look at here, I got some OLMECs with Melanesians. And again, look, I'm fair. I do accept that these could be Melanesians. Western scholars, they do accept the Pacific Ocean to America's contact. So these people could be Melanesians. For sure. They could definitively be Melanesians. So you can see some of the similarities between Melanesians and the OLMECs here. Is it lineage 1? Is it Mozambique? What are you referring to when you say lineage 1? I'm not really sure what you're referring to with that. So who do y'all think? Give me a 1. This is Mozambique, and I'm going to go over the Afro-Mexicans. Who do you think looks like the OLMECs more? These Melanesians or these Afro-Mexicans? These black Mexicans. Who do you think resembles the OLMECs more? Yeah, I don't think cotton seeds can't survive in salt water. So the cotton that floated here was brought, or the cotton that is in America was brought to America. So yeah, it definitely, it couldn't have floated here naturally, because they don't. Stevens did an analysis. They don't survive in salt water. So, and interestingly enough, that you mentioned this, the same scholars who say that the whole bay remains are inadequate because salt, messes up the carbon radiation. I think this is what some of them have mentioned, and Kamugisha even referred to this. Right? These same people say that cotton would survive going over. So like there's like a whole list of hypocrisies against Ivan Van Sertima. There's a whole list of hypocrisies against Ivan Van Sertima. So we're going to have to like get into those as well. We're going to have to get into those. I think I'm going to go into this and kind of want that to be... Yeah, he said the black Mexicans look somewhat Polynesians. All right, y'all. Let's get into it. Bruh, I'm ending the poll. y'all failed a bit. I'm ending this poll. I'm ending the poll. The poll is over. The poll is over. Y'all keep getting it lower and lower and lower. Hey, shout out to the hate watchers coming in voting no. Shout out to y'all. Voting honestly. The poll is over. The poll is over. It was a majority. I'm still happy about that, but the poll is finito. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to everybody who participated. All right, so we're gonna get into. Let me see. Look at this. 9th century individual from El Soco. This is according to Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA database, right? Using data from Fernandez et al. 19th century individual, I-13-200 from El Soco, Dominican Republic. He got BTM91. Genetic mic drop. Right? This is a genetic mic drop. Genetic mic drop. Argue with Harvard, argue with your mammy. You got haplogroup B. This is an African haplogroup, African haplotype. This will support Ptahhotep because a lot of the so-called Twa, Mbuti, Anu, they got haplogroup B. You got BTM91 in the Dominican Republic in the 9th century. So no Ptahhotep. The Melanesians, to my knowledge, did not build pyramids. Now, y'all could correct me, if I'm wrong about that, but they did not build pyramids. That beat is smacking, though. Hey. OLMECs were African. They got the African fabricing, busting it, rhymes, going in like all the time. They try to go against Ivan. All the haters and panos be crying. Sertima was right. Hey, Sertima had to fight. Shit. Yeah. Certified black man Monument F. They called him El Negro. Haters say mono. Curators in Veracruz didn't say mono. It's not a monkey. The hella flunky. It was a black man. Haplogroup B in El Soco, Dominican Republican. I'm freestyling, y'all. I'm having fun. A. Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA Database, AADR. Kenneth Lipson, proof for Vital. 5th millennia BCE. This is Belize in the 5th millennia BCE with BTM91. Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA Database Sequencing of Kenneth Lipson, proof for Vital, 2022. I-19944, argue with your mammy. Haplogroup B. Haplogroup B is in Belize. Yo, I'm the first one. You know, if y'all see some scholars talk about haplogroup BTM91 in Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA database, it came from me. I'm the first person who spotted this out. Ain't nobody else spotted it out. You know, and you got these terracottas on the bottom that definitively have African affinities. So, shout out to Wuthanol. Shout out to all of y'all. Ivan Van Sertima, he got all the ball. Hey, any skeptics on this DNA? Are there any skeptics in the chat on this DNA? We went over the DNA validation. We went into Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA database, AADR. We saw BTM91 in the database. Any detractors in the chat? Some of y'all who came in and voted no. Some of y'all who came in and voted no. Come on, show yourself. Any detractors? Y'all got to show yourself. Y'all got to tell me what it is if there's any detractors in the chat. You know, because we got this. We got the Chichen Itza remains. The Chichen Itza remains, you know, from the ancient DNA explorer, Adnak P. They got BTM 182 and BTM 91 in those remains. You know what I'm saying? After this, I mean, this is pretty much all I got. And I wanted to end it on the DNA tip just to show y'all. You got any detractors? Anybody in the build? Any detractors? Hey. If not, I'm just finna freestyle. Got genetics. Better respect it. Never forget it. Unneglected. African rooted haplogroups. African rooted haplotypes. Black as night. Ain't no fright. Sertima got the fight. 19th century Chichen Itza. Hey. Oh yeah, no, without history facts, we got to go overboard. We got to go, and that's really what it is, because we got the genetics on deck, archaeology on deck, you know, we got the linguistics on deck. But for other groups, it only takes a few. No, that's a fact without history. That is a fact. We got to go overboard, and I don't mind it because I got that dog in me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm willing to defend Mr. Sertima. I'm willing to defend it. I'm gonna keep freestyling it. You know, if y'all don't got anything to say on the genetics, 'cause I wanted to end it on the genetic. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, never neglect this. You gotta respect this. This genetic is hectic. I might even need to turn up the beat for me to rap a little bit better. Yes, that Kamji verse freestyle. Kamji verse freestyle. Pan-African is a name only. I call them PAINOs. They hella stupid with no brain though. They gotta get the game together. Stop fretting. Stop forgetting this history. It's not a mystery. You gotta listen to me like you got the Listerine. Brush your teeth. Get the facts. Don't come whack. It's hella OLMECs that were black. Ivan Van Sertima was on the attack. 1976. They came before Columbus. We about to get and stump this. Freestyle off the dome. Yeah. Chilling in my home. I'm feeling like the chrome. We about to get on. Yeah. Do I think the DNA testing is valid? Maybe not. Maybe so. Inferential. Sometimes it's hypothetical inferences, stats, and data, not facts. Yeah, honestly, I think that DNA is really tenuous. I think DNA is the weakest part of anthropology. But look, BT is found in pre-Columbian Mexico, pre-Columbian America, right? So, you know, it's out there. I also want to give a time to like, I need to shout out some of the supporters, some of the people who supported in the past. I got to give them a shout out on my Cash App. Shout out to those dudes. Hey. Gotta get with this, in the minus. Shout out to Dominique Gonzalez for joining the Patreon. All the members in the Patreon, I'm gonna get some more content coming your way very, very soon. Crap. Yeah, I can't do it right now. I wanted to give people some damn. They make it hella hard to log into this. Hey. She preaching, hella reaching. All right, I'm in for Shozy. Shout out to Maurice Anderson. Shout out to James. Shout out to Joey. Shout out to all of the supporters. I appreciate you. Appreciate your love and support. Hey, Chief Kamachi, look him up. Look, healthy green lifestyle. I don't even think I have very many women. I think I got like 10% women or something like that. But yeah, it's a very minimal female demographic. We can maybe change that if I get some more women to come on, but look, I just produce content, and I think maybe it's more men who support the content. Look, if y'all want me to make some more OLMEC content, OLMEC songs, I will. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and play my new song a few times, and I'm gonna close it out. So I hope y'all enjoy. And let me actually stream.
Nasceu a história que grita, OLMECs pretos, raízes que agitam, rostos talhados, lábios que contam na terra. A força africana brota, os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Do Atlântico veio o vento que guia, de terras distantes a sabedoria vivia. No barro e na pedra a alma resistia. Pretos e fortes, sua marca persistia. Escuta o tambor, o eco do passado. O Ivan nos mostrou, o legado é sagrado. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Oh, lábios grossos, narizes que falam nosso DNA, o tempo não cala. Desenhos antigos, histórias marcadas. Preto é poder, raízes guardadas.
It's supposed to loop.
Esse na vida manigou. De pedra nasceu a história que grita. OLMEC pretos, raízes que agitam, rostos talhados, lábios que contam na terra. A força africana brota. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Do Atlântico veio o vento que guia, de terras distantes a sabedoria vivia. No barro e na pedra a alma resistia. Pretos e fortes sua marca persistia. Escuta o tambor, o eco do passado. O Ivan nos mostrou, o legado é sagrado. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Oh, lábios grossos, narizes que falam nosso DNA, o tempo não cala. Desenhos antigos, histórias marcadas. Preto é poder, raízes guardadas. Esse na vida manigou. De pedra nasceu a história que grita. OLMEC pretos, raízes que agitam, rostos talhados, lábios que contam na terra. A força africana brota. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Do Atlântico veio o vento que guia, de terras distantes a sabedoria vivia. No barro e na pedra a alma resistia. Pretos e fortes sua marca persistia. Escuta o tambor, o eco do passado. O Ivan nos mostrou, o legado é sagrado. Os OLMECs eram pretos, oh sim, carregam no rosto o poder que não tem fim. De África ao mundo a verdade vai brilhar. Ivan falou e o povo vai lembrar. Oh, lábios grossos, narizes que falam nosso DNA, o tempo não cala. Desenhos antigos, histórias marcadas. Preto é poder, raízes guardadas.
New song is called Sertima, coming out soon. Y'all gonna get it when I release it. Shout out to everybody in the building. You know, hope y'all